Welcome to another episode of Banter. I'm old.
And I'm bald.
You are. I just made a good joke off air, and everybody missed it. I told him to get a haircut and get a real job. Come on, isn't that hilarious? Nobody? Anyone? We need a live audience.
It's more hilarious that not
need-
only are you old, but you have like the longest hair of anyone I know.
Well, yeah, that's true. There's nobody can get me to cut this thing. No, man, this is like Samson. I lose all my power if I get rid of this.
And how did that story end again? He didn't need the hair, right?
Man, you do know that story. You did not need the hair. So anyway, maybe that means that I'm in my infancy of understanding this whole thing we call life, and how that all works.
Or maybe you were just a big fan of like Fabio in the 90s or something.
Let me wave my hair back and forth like Fabio.
Yeah. I'm assuming that's why you did it.
I did do that one time. We did when I was with one of my teams, we did a slow motion like head banging. Right. And I always said that the reason I actually grew this out is so that I could headbang to Bohemian Rhapsody like they do on Wayne's World.
You know what? That's fair. And if that's the only reason, I applaud the commitment.
It's a great flick.
I would actually rather that be the only reason.
From now on, that is the only reason.
All right. Well,
anytime anybody asks me, I'm just going to say Wayne's World, Bohemian Rhapsody. That's it. And I don't need to explain it beyond that.
There it is.
There it is. That's what we got. So this week's episode we're going to go into here shortly will be about survival stories and all things surviving, which could be pretty interesting. So because of that, my shirt today is Rise Up St. Lucia. St. Lucia is an island in the Caribbean. I felt like it was appropriate.
And my shirt says beer.
Jack's beer. That's great. Great. I have a red stripe hat. I almost wore that too. So that would have.
Wow, that is a great hat.
See this? See this? Bottle opener.
Nice. Multifunctional.
This is the best hat made.
Multifunctional. What am I going to do? Not wear it?
I have a pair of flip-flops that have a bottle opener and a hat that have a bottle opener. I'm ready for my sodas.
You can open it with your teeth too.
For my 1970s Coca-Cola. Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, that. Or you go to like those Mexican restaurants.
Ooh.
That have like the little they're like 8-ounce bottles, like glass bottles. Right. They're always like a rand or like 9 ounces of.
Are Jarritos? No, Jarritos are not twist off. And I'm not going to worry about the pronunciation of that. I'm just going to assume that it's perfect. Those are not twist off. Before we get into anything, I'm just going to go into one incident where I bought 2 Jarritos and brought them back to my dorm room in college. Realized I had nothing to open them with, so I walked around the whole dorm, knocking on doors. So I found someone with a bottle opener, and I opened those bad boys up. I had to open them both at the same time because I wasn't going to go back for the bottle opener. So I just drank both in the same night, which was disappointing. But because of that incident, I now carry a bottle opener on my keys.
If you had one on your hat, you'd be good. And you wear hats all the time for obvious reasons.
Can't get sunburn on the top of the head.
You get sunburn. Anyway, I think it's your turn to rant a little bit. So I'm going to get my clock out.
I'm worried about this one.
I'll give you your 5 minutes. I have no idea what to expect this week. So ready? Begin.
All right. The reason I'm worried about this one a little bit is because I tend to get fired up when I think about this, when I talk about this. But I think we all know people who are oversharers. They tell you about everything they've got going on in their day, everything they've got going on tomorrow, the next week. So you know their whole work schedule. You know all of their coworkers by name, even though you've never met them, stuff like that. Annoying? Maybe. But is that the part that bugs me? No, it's not. The part that really gets me is these people who love to complain about how busy they are. Those groups overlap a lot. So what these people will do is they will overload their schedule to an extreme degree. They will do 10 things that are all optional, and then they will spend the rest of their time complaining to you about how busy they are and how they have no time to do the things they want to do. Now, if you are doing optional things, is that not the definition of doing something that you want to do? Okay. So
Yeah.
it's one thing for people to just like to complain all the time. Look, I complain, you complain, we all have those days. But to complain about being busy really takes it to another level for me. Because, like, you don't have to do anything. You really don't. Don't want to go to work? Get a different job. You know? I mean, I know that's boiling it down quite a bit, but, don't want to go to school? To a certain point, you don't really have to, And I'm talking about this from like the perspective of someone, my group, who's in like grad school and they're complaining about school, and you're just like, this is optional, extremely optional. Most people don't do this, but you chose to, and you are literally paying for it. So if you're going to pay for it, why are you complaining about how busy you are? And also, another part that goes into that is they tend to complain to other people who are doing the same things as them. Do you not think that I'm busy as well? We're in the same like graduate school. What do you think I do when I'm not here? Like acting like I just sit around and do nothing, which sometimes is the case, let's be honest. But people who complain about being busy act like no one else ever has anything on their schedule and like they're the busiest person you've ever met. So then when two of them meet each other, then they have this one-up battle of like, oh, I'm so busy. I got 2 hours of sleep last night. And it's like, no, dude, I'm so busy. I got 1.5 hours of sleep. And it's just a never-ending battle. That is the worst. I ripped all my hair out once listening to one of those arguments, and it never came back. So
that's why it's gone.
That's why it's gone. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Moving on. I have to say, though, I don't disagree with anything you just said. It's the first time I feel I'm with you. And now the listeners have learned why my hair is long, why yours isn't.
Perhaps you're one of those people.
This is a groundbreaking episode.
Breaking news.
Yeah. So the topic, I think, is we have to give a shout out to Mr. James Diamond. I believe he was the one, right? He was the one that commented in our comments.
Dropped in the comments
that we should do this topic, and I think it's great. I think the hard part for us tonight is going to be how do we limit this to under an hour? It's going to be a challenge. We
deal with that challenge every week, to be fair. So at this point, we're pretty seasoned.
That's true. So
we've covered literally none of the topic, and we're already 10 minutes in, for example. So
we're very dialed in. All right, so I'll get started. All right, so we typically, Mr. Bald and I, we like to do a little bit of our own research when we go into these topics, so that and all of it's on the internet, of course, because everything that's factual is on the internet.
It's proof that we're right.
And it's just like we say, we're experts in exactly
nothing
at all. So I went and I found a couple of different lists. This particular one, I figure it's pretty accurate. It's on historychannel.com. And this goes into the 5 stunning real life survival stories. So I read through all 5 of them, and I read a couple of different other sources to find some decent ones. And some of them I've heard, like I think everybody's heard that it was the 127 hours guy who cut his own arm off, and that one's theatrical, and they told that one. That one's pretty amazing.
Pretty benign at this point. It's been played out
at this point. I mean, he survived. Come on. Wow.
Isn't that kind of the point of this? Hold on. The topic is survival stories.
Well, potato, tomato. Had to use
Fair.
your phrase for that. So this story, this is kind of near and dear to our heart just a little bit. This guy was an ultra runner, ran a lot of crazy long races. This particular race that he did one year was Marathon des Sables in the Sahara Desert. So it's a 6-day stage race, running race in the Sahara Desert. So he did this in 1994. And there were some really bad sandstorms. Lost his way, became disoriented. Says he was married, father to 3 kids. He's 39 years old, pretty close to me.
That's old.
And I run ultras. Oh man. Yeah, that is old. Anyway, he became disoriented. One day after going off track, he found himself in an abandoned Muslim shrine in Algeria. In order to survive, he killed and ate bats. For fluid, he was forced to drink his own urine, lick dew off of rocks, and suck moisture, get this, out of his wet wipes that he had with him.
How?
It's usually alcohol based. Sometimes they are. I think sometimes they're not.
That's not toxic then? That's just okay?
Not. I thought eating bats would get him sick. Aren't there a lot of diseases from bats?
Isn't that literally how coronavirus started?
I think it is.
Is that literally how that happened? Is that guy? Did
it probably started from this guy, 1994. Now, this is a groundbreaking episode.
Wow, we're putting all the pieces together here.
Putting it all together. Continuing. Assuming he would never be found, this is crazy. We went through this for a long time. Assuming he would never be found, he slit his own wrists with a penknife from his supplies that he had. However, it was such a dry heat that the wounds clotted almost instantly. He didn't die. So he was forced to find his way out. And so he went back out into the desert and began wandering the desert for 9 days. He wandered in the desert.
This guy just can't get a win.
No, can't. So he's wandering and he eats insects and reptiles. And then finally he found a small village. From there, he was flown to the hospital, and the doctor said his liver had almost completely failed. He traveled 180 miles in all that time, lost 35 pounds, and it took several months before he could eat solid food again. You know what he did? He remained an enthusiastic runner and even returned and completed the race in 2012. He came back to a place where he almost died and then tried to kill himself and it didn't work. And then he almost died again. And then he said, I'm going to go back and run this race.
So after looking at all these survival stories, I'm sure you've come across similar themes, but most survival stories, it's not, oh, this thing went wrong and then they had to survive for a week. It's like, this thing went wrong. Then the next thing went wrong.
It's always
then the guy couldn't even kill himself when he tried to. And it's just it just keeps going. And it's just I can't imagine being in one of these situations because after I stub my toe and I'm like, oh, great. This is this day's over.
Day ever.
Yeah. Right. So can you imagine God, literally licking moisture off of moss?
Wet wipe, eating bats.
Catching bats, kind of impressive though.
Yeah, that's very true. And then I guess you get down to the moment where you just sort of do whatever you got to do to stay alive, and so you start to figure you either die or you kind of have to. It's my phrase, the improvise, adapt, overcome thing that I use all the time from the Marines. But at some point you just sort of okay, I either figure it out or I just lay here and I die. Which is the worst way to die. To just starvation would have to be the worst way because you literally just waste away and you just.
Yeah, I wonder about that. I mean, I don't know what the longest you've ever gone without food is, but I've noticed that after 12, 14 hours of not eating, I stop being hungry. So I'm very hungry, and then once I hit like 12 hours, my body's just like, all right, it's not coming. So I'm just not hungry anymore. So I wonder if dying of hunger is more like you feel like pain from like muscular atrophy, or is it atrophy or
I hear it's
dystrophy?
a lot of like stomach issue. Like at first you have a lot of stomach issues and stuff, and then it's probably just like you get super fatigued and waste away because your body starts eating its own tissue, like starts eating muscle away. That stuff's yeah. Like there's this great show if you haven't seen it already. That's on, I think it's on the Discovery Channel or Nat Geographic or something like that. But it's called Alone, where they drop people in like a remote area. Like they were doing it on Vancouver Island, just kind of south of Alaska, um, and they would put them there, and they would just leave them there until the last person tapped out. Basically, they'd give them like a GPS beacon, and then they'd give them like, okay, you could select 15 items, survival items you can take with you, and then whoever wins gets $500,000, and they're the toughest person. So they've been doing the show. That's like, I don't know, they're like 7 seasons in now, and they've gone to like Patagonia and all these places. And the two things they have issues with is starvation. So one guy on the last season, he killed a moose. He killed a moose, like a whole moose, and so you'd think he has meat for months. The problem was he was wasting away because the moose was pretty thin, didn't have a lot of fat on it. So he wasn't getting enough body fat. So he was actually still losing weight, even though he had a whole moose to eat.
That's shocking.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, so you obviously know the movie Into the Wild in the book, right? So I watched once. Les Strauss, the Survivor Man guy, he had a show on whatever channel, Discovery Channel probably. He did this breakdown where he watches that movie and he talks about here's what I would have done differently if I was this kid, you know? So there's a point where Chris McCandless, real person, killed a moose or something big like that, or like an elk or something. And Les Strauss paused it and he goes, if he knew how to preserve this, it would have literally lasted him the entire year. He could have eaten this moose for the whole year. And that shocked me that people know how to do that without any refrigerators or anything like that. That is shocking to me. I mean, people would literally travel across the ocean, like, colonial time, stuff like that. How were they sailing across the ocean? No refrigerator technology or anything like that. They just knew how to save their meat, stuff like that. So we have no gauge of how to do that because we've never had to like butcher our own food or anything. So we are so much more screwed than any other time of people ever for survival.
There are still like tribes out there that do that kind of stuff, and different people in different parts of the world that still do those kinds of things. But like when the regular Western world, or like first world problems, right? We don't know. We've gotten so far away from that, and that's essentially kind of what we're talking about, right? So with survival stories, it's so funny that most of the stories that I found are like maybe 100 years old. I think that was the oldest one I saw was like 1919, because before that they weren't survival stories; they were just life. Like think about it. Like
they're just stories.
They were just stories. It was just life.
It's just so a rough day.
Because like think about it. So people like back even like 250, 300 years ago in the United States, like are living in the Western frontier. They don't have electricity. They don't have running water. They, some of them didn't have weapons or anything. They just kind of made tools, figured things out, and like survived. And now we're like amazed when somebody from the Western world, like, plane crashes or whatever that happens, and then they survive. It's like amazing. And you're like, people did this for thousands of years, and it was just like no big deal. It's or
yeah, that's an interesting perspective where like every time you watch like some movie historically set, like say Game of Thrones, perhaps Game of Thrones fans out there, season 3, the Hound and Arya go on the road for like months. That would be a survival story now. They just took a horse and went out on the road and with like nothing, and that's just like how you. That's just
literally with nothing. Yeah, they just like It was just life.
He
That's
had
just
a
what they did.
sword.
Like, right. So like imagine asking one of your friends, just ask one of your friends. I'd be curious to know if anybody has done this or thought about this. I've had friends do this. Like I had a friend that like hopped on his bike with nothing, like didn't have his wallet, nothing, and just rode for weeks. And I'm like, how did you get food? Like, how did you? So it's so like my brain can't wrap around that. Like, okay, you just left and you didn't have anything, and like, how did you manage that? So I'm curious to know if there are people that have stories that we might know of, or could you imagine yourself like literally just standing up right now and just like a Forrest Gump thing? Like I just felt like running, just get up
Yeah.
and go. Like what would you do? I can't think. Like money, food, like especially this time of year, like you're not gonna be able. You might be able to get some fish. Like, like what do you start stealing food? Do you like?
Fishing. Fishing is a good segue into the story that I looked at here, and think that the reason why is fishing is hard, kind of, with like modern technology and like all the means in the world. Sometimes people go out and they don't catch any fish. Imagine you don't have a fishing rod and it's like, oh, now I need to catch fish to survive. That just blows my mind. So brings me to this story. The guy's name is Steven. If you've heard of him or you came across this at all. So in 1981, he sailed by himself across the Atlantic Ocean successfully. Makes it across, and he's like, all right, I'm going to sail home. Okay. Big storm around him. He's not really that worried about it. Obviously, a depth sailor, no problem. The storm didn't cause any damage to his ship, even though it was a really violent storm out in the ocean. But a whale shark during that storm rammed into the bottom of his boat and punctured the hull. So it started to sink. He realizes it's sinking, gets the raft blown up, which is like a 6-foot raft. And then he starts diving in to like the flooded part, getting supplies, coming back out.
Yeah.
Diving in, getting supplies, coming back out. So he gets some supplies before he goes. All right. So he knows he's 800 miles west of the Canary Islands at this point. And he had a spear gun with him, and he made water using a solar still. So one of those things where it just collects, basically it's like a greenhouse kind of looking thing. Water evaporates up into it and it collects clean water down so you can get clean water. So he had that for water. He's out at sea for 14 days, and all he's doing is spear fishing, gutting the fish, eating them raw, and getting like drops of water from the solar still. 14 days he signals a ship, and it kept on going, went right past him, like within a few hundred feet, did not see him. Okay, so he drifted for another month. All right, he's out of all shipping lanes at this point. Day 50, this guy's covered in like horrible sunburn because he tried to use like salt water to like, he's feeling a sunburn. So he's like, oh, put some water on me. Well, it's salt water, so that damages skin too.
Right.
So he's covered in sores, still struggling with dehydration because he's not getting a ton of water. And he's got a hole in his raft that he had to patch up somehow. He had some kind of like tape or something with him. So duct tape did the job. His total journey was 76 days, and he was found by fishermen off the coast of Guadalupe who saw birds circling his raft.
So he was
He
on
lost
his
a
way.
third of his body weight.
Yeah. Wow.
76 days.
As you say that story, like we've heard lots of stories, seen the movies, right? Theatrical stuff like Castaway or whatever. People are out on a raft for a long period of time. I think that would be one of the worst ways to go. Like, because I always think you're dying of thirst, surrounded by the most water you can imagine. That's got to be the worst. Like psychologically, that's got to be one of the worst things, right?
You're not just sitting there like, oh, come on.
Like, really, give me a break. And you can't drink it because you know
That's
you're gonna
brutal.
get sick, and it's just not. Yeah, so you're just
So,
like, and not only water, but I mean, there's probably millions of fish within like 400 yards of you, like millions that you probably can't get to.
mm-hmm. Imagine, okay, so there's that. And then we'll talk about a little bit of the psychological aspect of like, imagine how terrifying, like the ocean is a terrifying thing, right? Even with like a ship and sonar, we don't even know what's down there really. Like, it could be anything down there.
Loch
That
Ness.
has got
Oh, this is just perfect. You're stalling
like
out,
just
man.
the thought of not knowing completely.
That internet there you got going, bald. You're having a rough go tonight.
It's a rough go for sure.
So I think what you're saying is just like mentally trying to deal with the strain of everything is interesting. It's so when you and I can't imagine put myself in that situation, but the closest I've gotten is when I've done a couple of ultra races when you get down to the moment of like pure fatigue, everything's shutting down and you want to keep going, you know how hard you've worked to get there, and then you start to get kind of emotional with it, and you wonder how long it would take until you just like give up, right? Because everybody kind of has a breaking point, and so like it was like the story that I had at the beginning where the guy slit his wrists, and you're like, everybody has a breaking point. You just don't know what that particular moment was like for that person, and I think so in the Alone series that I watched, and I think that we can segue into something we were talking about before, but in the Alone series, he was a lot of the people in every single season, they would have a lot of people that would drop out of the event because they missed their family or they were just lonely because you're completely alone. And so I think that was a big aspect is people like they just miss companionship because humans aren't meant to be completely alone in reality. Like I think just that connection, they couldn't do it anymore. Their kids, their loved ones, they just started to miss them so much that they couldn't. And so I think that what we were talking about is what would be the one like recreational item or what would be the one thing to kind of keep your mind at ease or to give you that like sense of excitement, joy, something to like keep your spirits up. So I'm curious because you were the one that brought that up to me recently. What would yours be? What would your item be that would keep your spirits high while in a survival situation?
Well, thought about what you said a little bit, and I think I'm going to stick to my original answer, where I said a book.
Oh, bald this internet, man.
I will expand upon that and say it's called The Milagro Beanfield. I think that would be a good book to have just because every time you read it, you can read it from someone else's perspective.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you can use that book if you needed to for kindling. So it's a win-win. You
If
wouldn't.
you're in it for the long haul, I don't think you would ever want to do that. That just seems like a mistake.
So you're talking like I'm gonna be here forever. This is like a castaway, like 7 years kind of thing.
Yeah, like let's say, like you would never, if that was your one thing, your only recreational thing, like you gotta hold on to it. Plus, if you're really in the wilderness with like no semblance of society around you, that's the only thing that links you to like humanity, really, Because otherwise, like, why wouldn't you just evolve into more of an animalistic kind of personality,
It's true, and that happens. I've read some stories about that where that happens, right? And we'll get to that because I think there's some interesting pieces regarding that. But I had a really hard time with this one. Like I kept going back and forth, and I think I ended up going back to my original one. Was I would like something that reminds me of home, something of my family. Even if I didn't think I was ever going to get back to them, I think just having that would help keep me going, like knowing that there was somebody out there that was either looking for me or cared about me or whatever. And so I think that that would be the thing that would keep it. It'd have to be a picture, a memento, clothing item of a family, something that like kept me involved. Because like I get the book part, like I can't disagree with it. That's what you want. That's great. But I think I would go with something to kind of keep my own spirits up, and it'd have to be something for my family. Probably, something for my wife or for my daughter that just like reminded me of them and all that. That's got to be my thing, man. I got to stick with that.
Again, can't argue with that.
Can't, because it's my opinion.
You can't. I'll argue what did I say the other day? It's like, you know what? I'm going to argue that you shouldn't have an opinion on this. That stemmed from our music discussion.
That was a different topic.
Whole different animal.
Entirely.
Okay, so let's move on to this for a second. Your choice, would you rather be stuck in a survival scenario somewhere extremely hot or somewhere extremely cold?
Ooh, that one's pretty challenging. I would say, honestly, I'd probably say somewhere, oh gosh, I'd say probably extremely hot. And the reason I say that is, well, not just the conditions themselves, but I would imagine that someplace hot, there's probably more options for sustenance. Maybe not. Sahara Desert, maybe not. I don't know. But I would think that there are more creatures in hot than there are severe cold. That's a complete guess. I'm not an expert.
At anything.
At anything at all.
Well,
it'd be hard though, because like obviously you get dehydrated sooner. There's probably less of an option for water sources. So God, yeah, that's hard. Yeah, I think the cold is just, but I don't know. Maybe I'm bouncing back to cold because I'm going like, okay, it's cold, but I have access to water and I could potentially find food if I hunt or if I ice fish or whatever it happens to be. But I'm gonna stick with hot. Hot it is.
I'm glad you said hot because I am definitely on the side of cold.
Interesting.
The reason being,
tell me,
could the cold kill you completely? Like hypothermia, frostbite on very important extremities that can't use your hands or something like that, that can kill you for sure. That being said, if you were somewhere hot, typically, like let's say it's a desert, for example. Deserts are extreme hot, but then at night, 20 degrees. Okay? So you're dealing with extremes of the weather on both sides. Really difficult to survive both ends of the spectrum at once. Then, say you're in like a jungle, like an extremely hot, humid jungle. You're swarmed by mosquitoes and other insects all the time. Other poisonous things live in that climate. In the cold, you don't have to worry about any bugs, some poisonous plants, I'm sure, but it's just not to the extent if you were like, in a tropical region. In the cold, also, you can use snow as insulation at night. Like Bear Grylls did that thing where he just like dug a hole and like slept in the hole of snow, and the snow actually kept him warm.
Did it?
But
I
would definitely go cold for that reason.
Did it keep him warm? I mean, didn't he spend nights in the Best Western?
Yeah, right. He dug a hole in the snow, and once you get a few feet under the snow, it's a Best Western.
Yeah. That's right.
I think that was the point of the show. You just dig until you hit a Best Western.
That's the show. Yeah. Or you just keep walking until you walk into a Best Western. Yes.
Yeah.
Because they're out there in the jungle and in the Arctic. Yeah. So I don't know. I still think that like I said, I think your food source options in a hot, I guess it depends on hot. So like, are we talking hot like a desert? Or are we talking hot like a jungle? Because they're different things, right? So which one are we talking about? And are we talking, so then on that same note, are you talking cold like a tundra? You're talking cold like Like lots of snow cold or lots of just cold? You know what I'm saying? Because those things can
I'm
be
talking,
different.
so what I'm picturing in my head, it's like Yukon territory kind of cold.
Okay.
And I'm picturing like, okay, I don't know very many hot places. Either Sahara Desert, hot, or some rainforest.
See, but they're different. That's what I'm saying. Like, you, you, you can't, you have to give the same counterexample to cold as you do to hot, right? Because there's hot and humid in a jungle where there are lots of living things to eat from and running water to drink from.
And kill
And
you,
no,
and
like
maybe kill you.
I'm not disagreeing with you in that fact, but you have a lot more potential options for all things. In the Sahara Desert, really the thing that's probably going to kill you is just the heat itself, right? The open space, the heat, the dry
So
heat, lack of water, the lack of food options in those. So you have to think about the extremeness of those environments that are different because they offer you
and
different
technically, isn't Antarctica technically like a desert? Isn't that
things.
considered like the largest
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking
desert
about.
on Earth?
Like
Antarctica is. So
yeah, something like
we can talk
Antarctica.
about that too.
So that would be a good example. So like you could say something like, so like there's parts of, what is it, Russia that they're cold, they don't get a lot of snow, right? So it's like a dry tundra, but it's cold. And then you go to Antarctica where there's typically lots of snow and it's also very cold. Those are different environments. I think in Antarctica, you're probably gonna have less of a chance to find anything to eat. It's going to be a lot more difficult to find anything to eat than it is anywhere else. And I think you have to kind of think about that aspect of the survival story. Whereas in that tundra, that dry, cold tundra, probably have a little bit better chance of finding edible things.
So there was another story I came across in a very cold setting. In 1928, there was a woman who was hired as a guide for these guys who wanted to claim territory for Canada.
Read this one.
And you think you know the one. Okay, so she gets hired. Canada wants to claim this land that is currently Russian land. So these 5 guys or whatever go out there. It's freezing cold and they're on this island and they run out of rations. So few of the guys go back for help and she's left there with one other guy. Now that guy dies that she's with, and she's there for 2 years without any help.
Nobody comes back.
She learned to hunt seals.
Yeah, learned. That's the best part.
That's like, okay, it's one thing to be like, yeah, I was fishing, or yeah, like I found a bird's nest with some eggs. Seals are big, like there's no way that's easy. And then when she was finally rescued, she was like criticized because she couldn't keep that other guy alive. So she like lived out the rest of her days in like shame and poverty.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. I read through that one. That one was crazy.
That's shocking.
2 years. 2 years is that's a long one. Like that's one of the longer ones that I saw. Most of them are like, 50, 60 days kind of thing. But when they get up to like years of time, that's legit.
That's like maybe not even survival at that point. It's just like that
living.
she just lives there.
She's just living.
She literally just lived there.
She moved. She just moved to an island.
Yeah, it's like, oh, have you seen her in a while? It's like, she lives with seals now.
That's interesting.
And what took them so long to get back there?
I don't know.
That's 2 summers.
Maybe they got lost. We don't know. You don't know the other part of the story. Maybe they got lost.
Maybe they never made it back.
Maybe they never made it back. Somebody just randomly stumbled upon her.
You gotta wonder.
Is that what happened? Was she found eventually, or did she get out?
She didn't get out. She was rescued, I think.
Because it was an island, right?
If I remember what I'm reading correctly, she was rescued. Yeah, it was an island, so she was stuck there. Because I'm assuming when they went back for help and rations, they took whatever vessel they sailed there on.
So, we haven't dove into this question yet, but we kind of have pushed around it a little. And this was part of our conversations. And you know how much I like this type of stuff because we had a whole episode on zombies. But if you're pushed into a situation, there are lots of those stories where people have turned to cannibalism to survive. Like documented stories of people doing that in order to survive. There was a movie, it was called Alive, I think it was about like a rugby team, like a South American rugby team that was flying over the mountains in like Peru or whatever, and they crashed in the mountains, and it was wintertime, and half the team died, and bodies were all around, and these guys were trying to survive, and they kept like, they had no food, so they were debating with each other all the time about like, should they eat their teammates, like, and eventually they ended up trying little pieces, and there were a couple guys that would hold out, and then finally they ate, and so that's how they survived. They were eating their dead teammates to survive. And you're like, oh, I would never do that. You'd hear people like, I would never do it. But like, if you literally, there's nothing to eat, you have no other option, like, would you do it?
Again, every man has his breaking point, as you said.
And woman.
And women. Well, women might not have a breaking point. They seem to do better in these survival situations than men, from what I've read.
Yeah, 2 years.
Just saying. But that being said, I think that I would definitely have that point. It would be a lot different based on, I feel like, did I know that person? Like, was I close with them? If there was someone I was close with, I might hold out for like to the brink of death, without doing anything. But if it was like, I have never met this person, there's just this body here, this person here, it's like
a little easier to kind of
probably be easier, I think.
Yeah.
But here's a weird scenario that you never see in the movies, right? So 2 people still alive, and this, it makes sense. It's ridiculous, but I'm going to say it anyway. 2 people are trying to survive together. They never have the conversation like, hey man, like, I'm the weaker of the 2 of us, and you can survive if, like, you can provide for the both of us, you're the stronger one. My leg has like 25 pounds of meat on it. So like, if we can effectively lop this thing off, we can both eat my leg and prolong our survival.
They did that in The Walking Dead.
Did they?
Yeah, there was a group. There were a couple episodes. I don't remember. It was like season 6 or something. They came across cannibals, and that's what they would do. Is they wouldn't kill the people. They would just chop off little pieces of them at a time and eat them. And it was the same kind of concept. But and then in the movie, in the series Hannibal, he did that to a couple of different people where he made him eat him. That was even worse. He made him eat himself.
Well.
Like that's
that
anyway,
wouldn't be
okay,
fun.
we're going a little off topic here.
I'll be honest, it would not be fun to eat my own leg. But imagine a scenario where the weaker person voluntarily says, hey, we'll get out of here eventually, I think. We just need to survive somehow. So let's eat my leg together.
So that's a great, I think that's a
cute date idea, by the way.
What's that?
Cute date idea.
Wow, that went south. When was the last time you went on a date? Probably before me, I'm sure.
More recently than you, that's for damn sure.
Yeah, the last actual date with someone other than my wife was more than 20 years ago now. So yeah, been a while. And it will never be. So,
do you want to know what I was doing 20 years ago?
You were crawling around. Yeah, no, you were walking, right?
Learning to color, probably.
Probably learning to color.
Coloring?
I was in college. Anyway, so the whole topic we were on, there's a movie called Ravenous. I remembered the name of it. It was like I think it was in the 90s sometime. And it's based off of like, I don't want to say historical fact, but there's like old stories out there. I can't remember if it was during the Civil War or Revolutionary War. I think it was Civil War times. And it was in a mountainous area. And there was this whole troop that had gotten lost, this military group that had gotten lost. And they found a cave and they were trying to survive, and they were trying to hunt and they couldn't catch fish. And anyway, it was like bad winter. And one of the guys had died, and they were all debating whether to eat the guy, and they did. And one of the guys who had been a part of that had started to gather a taste for human flesh, and he started attacking everybody else. And so he was like killing people within his, so he was like the captain or whatever, and he was killing all of them so that he could eat them. And then ultimately he like, somebody found him in the cave and rescued him, and he's like, oh, thank you so much. And he got into their it was another military group, and he got into their barracks, and he started like killing them too to eat them. Like he was so ravenous, he couldn't maintain himself. And you hear stories about that too, like that even goes way back to like the actual stories of cannibals and stuff, where they would just get a taste for it, and then you turn yourself into like this, that's the only thing you feel you can eat.
Mad cow disease, really.
Like a mad cow, it's the same concept.
Mad
like
people disease.
They have no control over, so I know that's different than survival, but like that's, imagine it's kind of what you started with when you were talking about like trying to not turn too animalistic, right? Keeping the human side of you. And you'll hear some of those survival stories where they'll talk about in that show alone, like even after 20 days or so, they start to drift away from any thoughts they had of like the real world. They start to like hear things differently. They start to smell things differently, see things differently. Things just like, they become a little bit closer with nature. They'll talk about, they can, sense things happening.
The trees start talking to them.
Trees start talking to them. Oh yeah, they start hugging trees. But yeah, like that's really interesting to me, that psychological piece of how you change over the course of a survival event, and like how your brain kind of rewires a little bit. And you wonder, like, do those people when they come out, are they different or are they the same? Or curious.
Well, it's funny that you should ask that question, because I know that you don't think a person is the same person they were 10 seconds ago.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
So
go ahead.
After your belief, using your own logic against you, if we're constantly changing and you're never the same person in any given moment, then of course, if you go through something that drastic, you're never going to be similar to the person you used to be. There's no way. I think that even like, think about like Hamilton, the movie or the play, if you've ever seen or the story of Alexander Hamilton, right? His son asks for advice before going into a duel, and Hamilton tells his son, killing a man is something that you can never get over. So when you're in this duel, aim your pistol at the sky, basically. And I imagine that's probably true in any context. Killing a man or a woman is just you're a different person after that. I'm sure that you could never be the same before and after.
That's that traumatic stress. I mean, it's that trauma that you just can't imagine. Like, you can't imagine doing it, and then you can't imagine like. But that goes in this whole nother topic. I think we could do a whole nother show based around that. Like,
we probably could. Well,
I'm sure you're a bigger expert than I am, but that's probably the thing that you might be sort of have some expertise in.
We'll pretend I have no expertise at anything. We'll just stick with that.
So I don't think we should talk about it, because
it makes me more credible if I claim that. Does it make me more credible? If I know nothing about anything, then my opinions can be harder with no repercussions, perhaps. But maybe. Point is,
you lost me there. Go.
I can't imagine that you could go through a survival scenario where you eat another person and ever look at people the same way. You just be overcome by guilt, and like
it's either guilt or the other way, like we were talking about the other guy. Like, it's either guilt or you always see them as.
Either way, you'll never interact with the world the same.
Okay, so, and I have a question on that. I'm curious to see what you think of this. So, in regards to that, at what point somebody has done that, like eating someone, for example, does it turn into just like what we've, as a society, for the most part, have gotten into with cattle, livestock in general, cattle, pigs, chickens?
You're saying if that was normal?
I'm not saying like as a whole, but I'm saying like that person, like we have gotten to the point where it's just like, yeah, whatever, it's a cow, yeah, it's a pig,
Oh, so does that person look at it that way?
yeah, yeah, right, yeah, it's just it's. I think I'm sure there are sociopaths that already do that, but like,
I
you wonder
mean, you've seen Silence of the Lambs.
So the Hannibal show that I'm watching is, and we're done with it. We watched it. It was only like 3 seasons, but it goes into the whole storyline in a little bit more detail that they have in the movie. So Silence of the Lambs, The Red Dragon, and then I think Hannibal was the other movie. But that's crazy. Like he just had a full-on taste for it. And that's
Well, and then think about the guy though that they're looking for in that movie, right? And they're talking the whole time about like oh, like we should like go on the news and talk about our missing daughter and say her name and stuff like that and humanize her and stuff like that. Because then when the killer starts like she
think of him
starts
as
like
not.
saying her own name, like she starts being humanized, he freaks out and he like can't do it anymore. So I'm sure to an extent, do people like could you become like a cold-blooded, like single-minded
Yeah.
killer? And I'm sure people could, but like there's always some semblance of humanity where like you could snap. I think that anyone could snap back out of that.
I'd like to think so. I hope so. That would be a scary world.
Mine too.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a pretty good spot to end. And I feel like that was a pretty, man, we opened up a lot of cans of worms with that one.
I gotta be honest. That was a survival episode, and it just turned into a cannibalism episode.
I didn't mean to. My fault.
You love talking about cannibalism.
Maybe I should go check that out. I might need to get some help.
Just don't go on any safaris or anything.
I will not get into any survival.
No dog sled races, anything like that.
No ultra races in the Sahara Desert.
No, don't climb Mount Everest.
Don't climb Mount Everest. I'm not going to go to Utah. I don't want to be that guy.
Nope.
All right. So I think we've got some really good content here, and future episodes, we've got a couple of really interesting concepts coming up here soon. But next week, we will not have a show. I know, I can hear the crowd. I'm sorry.
What are you going to do?
You know, spending time with family is really important to us here at Banter. And we felt like that was the most important piece. So in 2 weeks, we'll be back. And this next episode will be brought to you by one of our student athletes, Sierra Schaefer, said, "What's in your bag?" That's the episode. What's in your bag?
Spoiler alert. Old's bag is a nightmare.
Yeah, I got a few random things in there. I think that will surprise some people. Things that have nothing to do with track and field, things that have really to do with track and field. Some things you're just like, why do you have that? Why does anyone have that as a thing to begin with? It's in my bag. You got to be prepared in case of survival. Okay, that's why I have all these things.
Yeah, that's why you have like used empty Tootsie Roll wrappers in your bag, just in case you need them.
I may or may not have those. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, but you never know when you're gonna need them.
Kindling.
Okay, let's go with that.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Leave your comments, subscribe, like the page, keep clicking that button. This has been Banter. I'm old.
And I've been bald.
Thank you. See you next week, folks.